I've had a moment this month where I've played a lot of shoot-em-ups, like classic shmups, to use the truncated parlance. And I just think they're fun. There's something very pure about their design, and I'm seldom good at them. But I just have these pangs of desire now and again to bust out my arcade stick and really try to learn, if not really master, how a given game
Give it a damn
works.
good thrashing.
Yeah, just really thrash that stick
really
around.
Go to town on your stick.
Really pump it. The core of a shoot-em-up developed in the 2020s is basically the same as the very first iteration of Space Invaders back in 1978. You just dodge and shoot, if we're being honest. You know, modern titles sometimes are actually less refined in mechanics than that formative work. They might look and sound better, but sometimes they do less with their kind of palette of options than Space Invaders did, because that game is one that has really simple systems like pressure and rhythm, attack and defense, risk and reward scoring, like all the cool stuff. Hot take for now as well. Space Invaders is still excellent to play. I'll say that up front. But apart from that, cover-based shooters like Gears of War and its ilk that dominated the late 2000s and early 2010s would not exist if it weren't for Space Invaders. Like jumping out in and out of cover. It's just Space Invaders. Yeah. It's just 3D Space Invaders. Anyway, that's not what we're going to talk about. This month, I played several short shoot-em-ups, all with their own kind of sub-genre trappings. But I wanted to pick apart how a few of these games function and consequently how I did or didn't enjoy them. So yeah, kind of headlines, but I don't know, a bit more in depth.
Schmedlines.
Shmup headlines. First up, in my shoot-em-up grab bag, a little Brazilian-developed game, could have had it on the show a few months back, called Dininho's Space Adventure. It is a simple, vertically scrolling, stage-based affair, and despite using many mobile game trappings in its design, like star ratings for levels, chunky art style, I think it's exclusive to PC and Switch at present. I don't think it's on phones. You travel up the screen, you avoid obstacles, you collect coins, you upgrade your ship at each stage's end. That's the loop. It's what you expect. It's all very plain. But it has a lot of problems, this one, because despite being a cute-em-up, you might call it, you know, a weird aesthetic classification that goes back to games like Parodius, taking the mechanical design of a game like Gradius, but replacing all the ships and enemies with cats and penguins and googly eyes, Dininho becomes rock solid with a brutally unfair difficulty spike, like 2 stages in, and there's 30. You know, it's really very unfair from very early on. Cruelly, you start your adventure with both a useless weapon that fires maybe twice a second, but also a ship made of glass that can take just 1 hit before total failure. And although stages aren't long, it's still very frustrating to get to the end of like a little 2-minute challenge, skim a bit too close to an obstacle due to trying to avoid incoming fire, and then whiff the whole run right at the death. It's quite annoying. The loop encourages you to upgrade your ship with your collected coins, as I've mentioned, but currency as well arrives at such a trickle at the beginning, and dying mid-stage means you bank none of your wares. So you could just keep replaying easier stages, which is kind of what you have to do if you want to progress. But it seems odd that a light-hearted shoot-em-up basically requires RPG-like grinding to boost your health and firepower enough to progress past the early game. More annoying than having to play a dumb shooter like it was like Dragon Quest or Phantasy Star. The game leads into the cardinal sin of making the hitbox of your ship the full size of the sprite as well. And this has not been common design since the mid-80s, maybe. We've moved away from that in shoot-em-ups. And most modern kind of bullet hell or manic shooters are built around ensuring the player knows where your weak point is. So, you know, sometimes it even incorporates sort of grazing bullets as its own scoring mechanic that they can pass over your ship, but just not the heart of it. So with Perseverance, I was able to beat Dininho. It was annoying. The difficulty was essentially like an inverse pyramid. So once I got past the midpoint, it got easier and easier as my ship got better. The first world of boss took forever. The second probably half the time. By the time I reached the 3rd level set and boss, I was essentially too powerful to lose. So yeah, it's not very good. It's outwardly inoffensive, but poorly play tested. So 4 out of 10 on that one.
Wow.
Next up, a game called Habroxia from Lilymo Games. This one has a slightly larger profile, if only because it was one of the final games to get a Vita release back when that platform was still in vogue for boutique publishers. So I had played it a little bit on the handheld. There's 15 stages here. Like Dininho, you can upgrade your craft with the currency you earn throughout your playthrough, but very different to that game. With skill, it still feels like you could viably beat this one with just a vanilla loadout by being good at the game. Shock horror. The sprites are smaller, bullet patterns and enemy waves feel much more curated, challenges are generally a lot more readable, and once you beat the game on its regular mode, you're invited to then go back in with harder variations for each stage. And I've enjoyed doing it. I'm kind of halfway through the second loop of the game. I do a level here and there. They're much tougher now. But again, it's down to me being better at the game. That means I progress as opposed to just putting all my money into having a bigger gun and more health. The weakest part of this particular package is probably the music. The visuals go for kind of an R-type style 16-bit presentation, but the music for some reason goes 8-bit chiptune, which is not a problem in and of itself, but the compositions are just really fucking dull. Like it feels like whoever was in charge of composing for the game basically just spat out 10 generic chiptune loops with no care or consideration for the game they were going into, and then just called it a day. And that's annoying. Annoying me.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
Like the music in Dininho was fine, nothing special. But with Habroxia, I've actively taken to playing on mute with other themes playing in the background, which is reasonably common for many people. I know you often play like your Switch or Steam Deck in silent, but that's not that common for me. So I thought it was worth drawing attention to. There is a Habroxia 2. I may give that a blast once the first game is completely lit. But from screenshots, it just seems to be more of the same. So, it is what it is. I got both in a cheap bundle in a Steam sale at some point. I'm sure if anyone is interested, they'll be back down to just £1 or £2 each in the near future, if you fancy a serviceable shmup to play whilst listening to a podcast.
Maybe
I'll give
this
podcast a 7 out of 10. Next
generous.
Up, Cozy Space Survivors. As the name implies, this is a game that takes a little inspiration from Vampire Survivors, but still felt twin-stick shootery enough for me to clump it into this pool as well. Cozy Space Survivors takes the essence of Vampire Survivors, but distills the core of that game down even further. You're plonked into a big open expanse of space with a little list of missions to complete. Every run is just 10 minutes. Beaten missions carry over to consecutive runs, and you're just kind of breezily exploring and shooting and leveling up. And it's really nice. There's 5 distinct spacecraft that you unlock over the few hours it takes to beat the game. Each one functions completely differently. There's an all-rounder. There's a massive tank that can equip way more weaponry than all the others, but it's very slow. There's a little scout ship that can't use weapons at all, but has to damage enemies with its rear boosters by spinning into them, like some of the vehicles in Blast Corps for the N64. And it really changes the game up, so it remains fun. You finish all the objectives, you go, oh, new ship, and it genuinely feels like, oh, new game, which is cool. The currency earned in each run can be applied to meta progression upgrades like Vampire Survivors, and at almost the exact point you might say, I think I'm getting bored of this. You've beaten the whole thing. It's just the perfect length, really. It delivers on its intentions pretty much perfectly. Out of interest, I was reading through the game's discussion page on Steam and saw someone ask if the developer intended to add anything more to the game. And bearing in mind that this is a game produced by a solo developer, he popped in the thread very nicely and basically said, paraphrasing this is, I'm just one guy. This has taken like a lot of my time this year. I think it's a pretty complete experience as it is. So
can you hear that?
Yeah, I can.
Sorry.
Is it your phone nearby?
Yeah, but
It doesn't normally
it's been
do
here
it.
the whole time.
Yeah. Anyway, it shouldn't be on the overall recording, just your side, I think. I can hear that. Is that you being funny with football?
Yeah.
Right, I'll do that a little bit again. Bear in mind, this is a game produced by a solo developer. He popped in the thread to basically say, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm just one guy. This has taken a lot of my time this year. I think it's a pretty complete experience that it is. So other than bug fixes, that's pretty much going to be it. And I thought, it's a nice, honest answer. He's addressing the problem. And the user response, and I'm not paraphrasing here, this is a direct quote, in block capitals is, so it remains in early access with no updates and calls itself finished. No updates is not a good start. Would have been good to know before. And the kicker is that aside from the game never professing to be in early access at any point, it costs £3.
Come on, people.
Like, how much content do people expect in anything? Like, if I stop at a service station on the way home, £3 buys me exactly 1 can of Monster.
Yeah.
And the enjoyment curve on that is 15 minutes at the max. Cozy Space Survivors, I played for 3-4 hours, I think, before I beat it. I had a wonderful time. A solid 8 out of 10. Highly recommended. But yeah, people are fucking awful.
Dreadful.
Awful. So, last up, final shmup. It's got to be higher than 8, doesn't it? Because the way I've been doing this stupid build-up. Razion EX for the Nintendo Switch. This game has a little story behind it. I don't think I've shared this on here before. Razion comes from a German team called NG Dev Team. they made a name for themselves making aftermarket boutique shooter releases for the Neo Geo and then the Sega Dreamcast, and now have moved to also putting out occasional titles via their web store for the Switch. Now, through my own forgetfulness, so my fault, I missed 2 different web sales for physical copies of Razion EX. And for a long time, it seemed like I was just not going to be able to get a hold of this game because the second-hand market erupted on this one. And some months later, the game got a small reprint. And I was lucky enough this time to manage to get my order in. So I was very excited. Now, some time passed, and I started seeing others online excitedly showing off their copies of this reprinted game. And I suddenly realised mine just had never arrived. So I got in touch with NG Dev and I said, are you sending this? Because I haven't got mine. Or has it got lost? Or is there any problem? And I got a very strange email response that said, yeah, sorry, your copy came unsealed from the factory. Do you want it? And I was like, yes, yeah, I would, because I want to play it. That was my intention. But I'm also going to assume that you're going to be some sort of partial refund because I did buy a sealed new game. That's not what you're telling me you're sending me. So without email communication, got no response. A few days later, I got a partial PayPal refund. It was about a third off. So I was like, fine. Put it out of my mind. I'm going to wait and get my lovely game. I assumed that in a week or two, I'd finally receive my unwrapped copy and then I'd be able to play. 2 more weeks passed, no shipping notification. Reach out again. This time I get an even stranger response saying, yeah, yours is gone actually. And then just a full PayPal refund. And the game at this stage on the second-hand market was regularly selling for north of £200 British. So I was not in a good mood, really cheesed off at that. Now, fast forward a bit, the game now a relative memory. I was chatting to a friend of the show, Casper, who mentioned he was looking to downsize his Switch collection. And in doing so, Casper, the absolute gent, offered me Razion for a price I literally could not pass up. And I can't express how grateful I am on this one because I had just written it off as basically being unobtainable. And the game, yeah, it's really good. It's really good. Hey. 9 out of 10. 9.5 out of 10. Let's push it right up. It's a standard horizontal bullet hell shooter. The dodging mechanics work well. The charge and shot mechanics work well. It looks great. It sounds great. My arcade stick has been sat out on a chair in the lounge ever since it arrived because gradually I've just been improving my skills bit by bit. And it's been a really nice, consistent background focus for a good while. There's 5 stages in total. It's like a proper old school arcade game. On a good run, I can now get to the end of the 3rd stage without using an additional credit. If I keep plugging away, maybe one day I'll beat it on a fabled 1 credit clear, but I've not got there yet. But it's been really nice to learn and get better at and feel like I'm really making progress. So a great game, but also a great guy. You know, a huge shout out to Casper for essentially making a little boy's dream come true, allowing me to slot this little gem of a shooter into my physical collection. Casper and me are kindred spirits in that he has had moments of obsessive collection in the same way I do with my physical games sometimes. And he basically said I'd gone from thinking I need to own every physical shoot up in the world to saying I will own none of them because I can't stop myself. And that's why he was selling off a lot of these games. But, you know.
It's basically me and you together, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So one man's fixed mental health has enabled my continual downfall. But I really appreciate it. Lovely game, lovely guy. Thank you.